Hello, how are you guys doing? My name is Chris A. Matthews, and you were listening to the Marriage Underdogs Radio Show. And we have a phenomenal guest. And yes, they are a licensed marriage and family therapist. I want to introduce you to Angela Skurtu out of St. Louis, Missouri. How you doing, Angela?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad that you took the time out of your schedule to be on our show today. You are full of so much experience and knowledge, and I just can't wait to crack this open and get to it. So today our topic will focus around sex and desire, and you are a credentialed sex therapist as well. So before we go any further, I just want to give you a space, Angela, to introduce briefly to the audience what got you into the field of marriage and family therapy, and more importantly, what got you to focus into our relationships in sex.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Actually, religious trauma is the answer. It started with growing up in a very conservative religion that shamed everything around sex, specifically for women. And so when I was growing up, we were raised in purity culture. That was the common thread at the time, which, by the way, it's interesting. Things have changed since then. Like, even like people in that religious group are looking at it like, ooh, purity culture was kind of a bad thing and caused a lot of harm. But at the time, everybody's like, this is great. Like, let's do this. Let's destroy everybody's natural way of being sexual. It's fine.
Right.
So that's what they did. And as a result, a lot of my friends got married very young, like in their early 20s. And some of that was the way the religion kind of encouraged people, by the way. So what I would have happen is I was always the friend that everybody came to for just advice. It was very open and they felt comfortable with me. And one by one, as my friends got married, a year later would come back to me and be like, Angela, I'm having sex with my partner, but I'm not really enjoying it. I'm just doing it for him now. And it was like literally one by one, they were knocking off like flies. Like they'd get married a year later, they were over sex. Get married a year later, over sex. Get married a year later. And I was like, this is problematic. And part of it is that like we were raised in shame around sex, and then suddenly you're given this idea that like once you're married, it's fine, just go for it, have fun. Well, you can't do chronic shame with sex and then just like, okay, it's better now, the ring's on your finger. No, like they basically shut down these women's natural desire for sex. And now my job today is helping all of these women refine themselves again, and men, because I do want to be clear, like it impacted everyone. While guys were given somewhat of a pass in the same religion, it destroyed their desire too, and it destroyed their natural ability to create chemistry and learn how to do that with each other. And so a huge portion of my job is working through religious trauma and reteaching people to own their sexuality in a more positive and freeing way.
I'm glad that you mentioned how religion can be this catalyst for the mentality that people develop around sex. And it's not intended all the time to be done in a way that takes a person's ability to have pleasure away. But when we put the shame around it, it easily does that. And I want to learn more about these clients that you work with, because I'm sure the people listening have had the same experience where they get married and how they might have expected sex to be isn't what it really is. Talk to us about some of the myths, and let's debunk some of those, right? The myths around when you get married, sex should look like X, but it's really Y.
Well, there's probably a billion of those. So even the idea that sex is going to be good right away is probably a myth. It can be good right away if you have the freedom and comfort in your body to explore, and if you as partners have good communication. It can be good right away if you have a lot of heavy attraction or chemistry with each other. But ultimately, for sex to be good in marriage long term, you need to get comfortable in your body, get comfortable in your mind about sex, and get comfortable talking and interacting with your partners. That's actually from Emily Nagoski, by the way, so I can't give that all as my own. But if you think of Come As You Are, the book, She talks about safety in mind, body, and context, relationship context. And so a myth is that sex should be easy or should be spontaneous. Well, it only is easy if you have those three things, and people have to work for those three things. So until you've kind of come to a comfort level in your mind and body and in the relationship and being able to talk and openly ask for and share what you're wanting, then there may be a period in the beginning, like a honeymoon period, where things are a little bit easy. But then after that, if you don't learn those other skills, then your relationship's fucked. Is it okay? Is it okay to cuss? I didn't ask.
Yeah, so we want to be mindful. I try not to offend any of the listeners. So we'll attempt to. I know you're being your authentic self, but for the sake of the interview, we'll attempt to minimize it.
I will attempt to minimize the F word, but I do use it a lot in my therapeutic work.
No, definitely. Now, I want to go back to something because you basically did what I was asking in terms of the question, the major myth. So the major myth is that people may think sex is automatically supposed to be good. And you talked about how that's supposed to be easy. And you talked about how when we add communication ongoing, plus you mentioned three pieces, but the one I want to start with is safety. Because usually when we talk about safety and sex, we just think about contraceptives, right? We don't think about being safe with the person. So how would a couple be able to re-engage in sex after safety has been lost? And safety from all areas, infidelity, there might be domestic dispute, it may be a breach of boundary of information that was leaked. How do we regain the ability to do that, to be intimate after that safety has been lost?
So, well, first we have to reestablish some kind of safety. And when we think of safety, I really want people to think of, like, you mentioned conflict, for example. If a couple is having volatile conflict, there's not going to be safety for vulnerability. Sex at its core is very vulnerable. Somebody is literally inside of you, or you're inside of someone else. I mean, not all the time, because of course sex can be creative and varied, but like in that core, like penetrative sex experience, it is like you're inside somebody or you're being penetrated. So like to be that vulnerable with somebody, you need to be able to feel safe in vulnerability in other spaces. Actually, there's this really cool theory to look at for any of your listeners who are interested. Look at arousal theory. You can find it on Very Well Mind. But basically, arousal theory suggests that we have an optimal amount of arousal, that like you can almost get overstimulated if you're too intense, like doing things too intense sexually.
That's when it starts to hurt, right?
Huh?
That's usually like at the end, if they keep going and it starts to hurt.
Well, overstimulation it's kind of like, if you think of sex like a pool, it's jumping in the deep end too quickly. And so if you jump into the deep end, you can feel like you're drowning. And so what you're looking for is learning to create safety in the shallow end of the pool first, right? And so, or even around the pool, like this pool looks like safe. There's not like dangerous things on the deck. So like if we think of our communication basically as like creating a safe, clean deck so you don't like trip into the pool, like that's like your stage one, is how do we start talking about sex in a way that is fun, and that like sex can be contained in the conversation, for example. Because like even that, I have couples who don't feel safe because as soon as sex is brought up, then it's like, oh, now I have to have sex. That's akin to feeling like you literally tripped into the pool.
What you're talking about?
I'm talking about pressure, yes.
And we hear that, and I hear that from a lot of female clients. I do a lot of work with predominantly heterosexual couples, and the female partner will make comments, and this is a common when they touch their male or their husband, the husband instantly thinks that means sex, and they will say in therapy, I just want to be able to touch you and enjoy the physical intimacy, and it doesn't always have to lead to sex.
Yep. So that is emotional intimacy and affectionate intimacy. And if you think of the body as warming, or if you think of it like that shallow end of the pool, what she wants is safety in that shallow end of the pool. Like, let's just touch. Let's be affectionate. I want you touching my arms. I want to touch your arms. And I want that to be its own separate act that I can get comfortable with. Because essentially she or he, they're warming to each other. And so one of the biggest challenges I see with couples, typically in the heterosexual couple, is the female needs to feel safe in that shallow end of the pool, and the guy needs to learn to match pace with her, because he's like ready to jump into the deep end, and she's like, hey, I'm still over here. Like, can you match pace with me? And together, if they can both be putting effort into creating that heat with each other, like sexual heat is what I'm talking about, usually he has to slow down his pace and she has to learn to be more intentional about putting herself in that sexual energy with her partner. Because the female also, like typically, because they haven't learned to own their sexuality, just stays shut down and expects him to kind of like draw out desire out of her. And that's not how desire works. You each have to bring your own sexual energy and then you can amplify sexual energy. But if you aren't both bringing that energy to the table, this person's going to bring energy and it's going to squash this person's. And then the whole thing shuts down. And then everybody's pissed.
So you said something that was really mind blowing to me just now. The pace, and that hits because when couples get together in the honeymoon phase of any relationship, it's often they're both at a high pace.
Yes, because it's the honeymoon phase, right? They're like, oh, I love you. I just want to be all up on you.
And then when you look at growth and development stages of life, when you're in your 20s, 30s, the pace may be higher for couples, and then as they get older, the pace may slow down. I want to learn more about how partners can manage that pace, because it's common that one partner may have a higher pace or maybe moving faster than the other. Talk about how they can manage that pace to be on the same page.
I have this desire scale I've created. It's actually going into my next book. And basically it has people from 1 to 10 describe what's sexuality at a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, all the way up to a 10. And I have each partner describe like what feels like a 1 to me, what feels like a 2 to me. What I often find is they're very different. Like what's a 2 to a guy is very different than a 2 to a girl. But even having them have that conversation allows them to figure out what pacing they need to be going at. Because here's an example. So in my early stages of my career, I would say, why don't you guys work on flirting with each other? And I would think flirting is like level 1. But even in flirting, here's the difference between like somebody who's high pace versus low pace. So a low pace person might send like a compliment, like, you look cute today. A high pace sends a dick pic. And that feels like flirting to both of them. But that dick pic feels like maybe an 8 to the other person, right? And actually, we shouldn't be too gender specific, because I've seen females be just like this as well, and males be like, oh, that's too fast for me. So what pacing looks like is whatever that 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s are, but like having them communicate to each other what that looks like, and then teaching them how to warm up together. So usually, like I said, the higher pace person needs to learn to slow down a little bit and match pace, but the lower desire person tends to need to learn to actually put energy into the sexual game, because they're not putting any effort in. They're usually waiting for their partner to draw out desire, and that's just not how it works. You have to bring your own energy to the table.
And it sounds like a lot of the husbands I work with, and females for that as well, I don't want to be gender specific either, but the person who usually initiates becomes responsible for drawing out the sexual energy.
Exactly. And that's not how it works. Like if one person's initiating all the time, think of it like you're just shooting darts in the dark. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? And over time, that person gets tired of doing it, and then they stop trying. And what they do is they wait for the other person. And the other person still isn't putting energy into the game. So it never happens, or it happens like once a month or like once every 3 months. So then what ends up happening is the person who stops now is in this waiting game and building resentment. And then by the time they get to me, well, they're having angry arguments and they're not anywhere near safety, which is stage 1 to be sexual and to build the sexual energy.
And they have another R. Before they get to resentment, they've endured rejection. So you have this rejection piece. Yeah. And then it's resentment. So you're putting on a master class on where the rejection and resentment come from.
Yeah.
It comes from not having the pacing or being responsible for drawing out the desire from your partner, which isn't just a sole job. That's not a one person job.
It's a team sport. Sex is a team sport.
Love
you think of it like tennis, right? Like you both, if you're playing doubles, You can't have one person running all around the court and the other person's like, oh, the ball didn't come to me. That's not a good team sport. You got to play together.
Now, how do we manage these conversations? Because I hear a lot of partners come in, and let's say they're a couple with a new family, so they just had a child, or they've added to their family, and usually in counseling, the spouse will say, "Well, he just doesn't understand. I'm breastfeeding. I'm up all night. I'm working." And it's like sex is the last thing that the person wants to think about. How does the husband, or how does the partner who has been required to draw that energy out switch roles, right? What does that look like in terms of having that tough conversation?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on this one. I Ideally what I like is when I get people before pregnancy or right before they have the baby to kind of explain, yes, biologically, your body doesn't necessarily feel like it in those moments, but there are still ways for you to create intimacy and warmth with each other while you're getting through that phase. And I would want to prime people to like be thoughtful and intentional about creating that space with each other. After it's happening, I really get annoyed with this, but I think in our society, there's a way that we will just say, well, this is just what's normal. Everyone else is doing this, so this is what's happening, and you just need to deal with it. And really, it's one of the best ways to dismiss your partner and make them feel like they don't matter. And again, reject them. And so, for like trying to very kindly coach someone through this, I might say, I might first just meet them where they're at and be like, yeah, it is. It is very difficult work that you're doing. And it is hard when you're in the throes of new mommyhood or new daddyhood to feel sexual. My playful phrase is it's hard to go from diapers to desire, like they don't easily mesh. And so for you to even get into a place where you can warm to the idea of sex. So I really think of like heat, like a thermometer, right? Like how do you warm to each other, right? So people who are very cold to sex need to first warm up to what their minds and their bodies to sex. And so it may look like needing time away from their child for a while, right? Like if they have family members who could take their kid for a night, challenging themselves to go on dates where they remember their people, not just parents. Because again, you're a person first. Yes, as a parent, it is our job to give, but if you don't save a space for yourself, you can't be sexual if you're not a person. If you're constantly, you did, just so everybody knows, when you're in a caretaker role, your brain naturally has a mechanism to shut down desire because it's not like there's a safety mechanism to not want to have sex when you're in a caretaker role. So one of the things people need to do to warm to sex is to get out of that caretaker role for periods. And so like a night with your kiddo away at the parents' house or a weekend away together. Like when I first had my baby girl, I have a 9-year-old now, but I knew these concepts. I knew them. And so I remember I had to rip that Band-Aid early because I was like, I'm not going to let this impact my sex life. And so I had a sister who helped me, but like I needed help, right? Because it's hard. I'm the mom and I have to do all the things. So like first I had her take her overnight, but then even when she did take her, I asked her to send me pictures. I remember there was this phrase they remembered me asking constantly, like, is she happy? Like I just so worried and guilty for letting my kid, but like I'm so grateful for having done it because I do have a space for my kid and a space for me. I am a person outside of being a mom, but I had to challenge myself early on. And there were other ways I had to do it too. Like I was at Club Fitness, which is a local fitness joint, and they actually had babysitting as a part of it. So like that was me giving me space for myself as a person. And the cool thing, and again, it was a baby. So I was like, oh my God, are they going to ignore her? Luckily, I just want you all to know that at gyms, when there's a baby, they never let them go. They just hold them like, oh my God, there's a baby. Like, you know how women are when they hold babies and they smell them? Like it's just a weird experience. But I just want you to know your baby won't be ignored because they get tired of the kids and they just want the babies. And so like those were all things that I needed for reassurance, basically, to feel like comfortable in myself that I was taking a little distance from my baby because it was hard, because it's moms, we just want to give everything to them. And so the big advice there is find a way to, one, really love them for where they're at and understand that a mom just wants to be everything for her kid and She needs self-care and to be herself, be a person in order to be the best mom version of herself. Like she can't deplete herself to the point that she's like dead inside.
So
Does
it
that
sounds
make
like
sense?
no, it makes perfect sense. So if a husband's listening and they are in the midst of transitioning, growing their family, their wife or girlfriend or spouse has just had a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to have sex or to regain that intimacy and connection, it starts with making sure that the new mom has the space away from the baby to
Mm-hmm.
focus on herself and her desire. And the thing you said that stood out was when a mother's in a caretaker role, they can't be a caretaker and have that desire, because the way we're wired is to suppress that desire to be sexual, because the need to be a caretaker comes to the forefront. But what I
Yeah.
heard is you can have both. There just has to be a level of intentionality behind it. And then you also talked about earlier how in our society there's this, well, that's the way it should be. And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be that way. No, you don't have to neglect one area to build in another area. You can actually be well rounded.
I like the phrase sharing priority. Like, I
Hmm.
think people like, how do you share priority? If you think of it like a pie chart, it's not, I have to do everything for this or everything for this. That's too weighted on one way. We need like balance looks like, how do you share priority? How do I make time for myself? How do I make time for us as a couple? How do I make time for my kid? Like, we need shared priority.
So if you're with an absolute all or nothing thinker partner, that's going to be a lot more challenging, because I see a lot of women coming in therapy, and even men for that matter. Men that come in and say, "Hey, make money. I have to make money." Well,
Yeah.
you got to provide. I do provide. I make money. Well, you got to be intimate. No, I make money. Well, you have to help her out with the kid. Well, I make money. So it's like men
Yeah.
will come in with that same sentiment, and women may come in with the sentiment of, I'm a mother. I'm a mother. And I'm
Mhm.
hearing you say that our identities go beyond just one role. And in order to have a pleasurable, plentiful sex life, we can't just be stuck in one role. We have to be
Yeah.
able to balance.
And going back to that, like, this is how our world is normalizing it. Just because the world's doing it doesn't mean it's right. Like, we screw things up all the time in this planet. Like, let's just be clear. Your friends may be all doing this same thing, but that doesn't mean they're doing the right thing. I'm the one watching from the stands here. I'm in the threshold of like, oh, here's how this is feeling. Here's how this is feeling. This idea that we can only be workers and parents is failing. And people need more than that to have a holistic quality life. And so, yeah, absolutely. Don't, just because your friends are doing it does not mean it's normal or healthy. In fact, we sometimes do things and don't know why we're doing them. That's kind of the human condition.
I want to go back to your book, because I am so captivated by the skill you have in your book. Can you talk more about the book, the title of the book, and what inspired you to write the book?
I can, but the title is a cuss word. So
Go go
can I
go go
cuss?
go, go for it. It's okay.
All right. Well, I will say I'm workshopping the book title, so maybe you can help me with that too. But so I had three titles I'm workshopping. One is Becoming Fuckable, a couple's guide to improving their sexual desire. The second one is From Fuck No to Fuck Yes, which I'm getting a lot of positive feedback for. And again, it's about how to improve your desire. And then the third one I'm thinking of for people who struggle with the F word is Desire is Not a Switch. So I'm still like, I'm writing it and workshopping the title, but I'm very open to like, how does that land?
The first two are more captivating, I will admit.
Why you gotta
Right.
cuss, man?
Now the first two are captivating. Now don't get me wrong. I a year and a half ago I renewed my level of faith, and my goal is to not be a representation of anything that could persuade people away from wanting to work with me or my practice or counseling. But by no means am I judgmental at all. I definitely understand the language, because when you said those first two titles, your antennas raise up.
Well,
So
and it's intentional, right? I'm
yeah.
trying to teach people like when we think of sexing, having sex, you're thinking of that word, having like fucking, right? How do I do this more?
Well,
And
well,
so
well, well, let's go back to that though, because some people use making love, having sex, and then they use the F word. So they kind of categorize where I think effing has been known to take away the sentiment. And I think that's why some people don't like the F word, like, oh, I'm just a piece of meat. I'm just a desirable object at that point. It's not as sensual versus like, I can't really say to my wife, hey, you want to F? Versus, hey, baby, I'd love to have some close time or something like that. So I think it just matters. But some couples are cool with that, right? Like, I could clearly think of my sister as one person where if her husband came over to her and was like, you want to F? She would cry. She would be like so overwhelmed by that potentially, right? She would love that. But my wife would look at me like, what? You better talk to me better. So it just kind of is, right? But I mean, you don't write a book or do anything for every audience. You do it for your audience. So
yeah, of course.
But
So I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm writing about, and it is about, you know, that desire like scale that I'm talking to you about. It's really about how you teach people to warm up to sexual ideas. And what's funny is as you were talking, you're basically solidifying why I'm doing this book, right? So the person who, if you use the F word, it freaks them out. Where are they on the desire scale? They're probably lower and not as warm to sex and sexual concepts, right? Whereas somebody who's like, oh my God, thank you for asking me that, is maybe a little higher up and like been waiting for somebody to be a little more graphic and present. And so one thing I'm going to teach people in this book is back to arousal theory. There's arousal of mind, intellectual arousal, there's emotional arousal, and then there's physiological arousal. And so in the book, I'm basically breaking down what do you do in your mind to get your mind more warm and primed for sexuality. So you're more interested. So you want sex. Because a lot of my clients come in, they say, I want sex. So they don't want it, but they want that sense of, I desire this. I'm motivated to do this. And so, I'm talking to people about how to put your mind in a space where you could be more warm and open to sex. I spend a chapter just focusing on the emotions and like how to put yourself in that safe place. Because safety isn't just in the relationship. It's like, where are my shame spots? Where are the places in me that are blocking me from being open and comfortable and safe to sexuality? Like emotions are really tied to our safety and comfort in this world. And so if sex is so uncomfortable that you feel triggered, you're not gonna want to have sex. Like that's a very like distant place. And so then I'm basically breaking it down: mind, emotions, and then from those two, behaviors that will help you move along that desire scale and be more intentional about creating sexual energy with your partner. And it's all, the first section is all just about the individual before I do anything with couples.
I'm glad you mentioned the individual piece because we bring all of ourselves into a relationship. And if we don't have that part worked out for us, then how are we going to properly teach or communicate that to someone else? And even men that are going through different transitions, I've heard, I've had clients due to medical complications may have experienced erectile dysfunction, and the shame around utilizing external devices in order to pump blood to the penis has been like a shameful event. And they would get ready for sex in private, right? So when you talk about the us part first, that's huge. Talk about...
Can I talk about what you just said, though, about males with erectile dysfunction? Because if you think of sex as safety for males, right? I really believe in listening to the penis. Like the penis is an extension of your body. And actually, there's this really cool science about like having two brains. You have your brain up here and you have your sort of gut brain, which is your body's sensory brain, your body's connection to sensations. So this idea of a guy being in the back room getting himself ready for sex says to me that physiologically, like what's being done with his whole body. So like one of the things that's getting in the way for safety for male sex is that it's all penis centered. Like they're only dick dimensional. That's the thing. And like the problem with that is you have a whole body. Men have a mind, men have emotions, men have a physiological arousal. So if the sex is just focused on him getting erect and getting penetration, that's not good for male sexuality. Like what is being done to stimulate his mind? What is being done to like do whole body touch. Like again and again, I'm hearing from my males. I was saying this to my friend the other day, but I'm like, males are hungry. They're hungry and they're lonely. And it's because they're not being treated like whole people in their sexual realm. And you're a whole person. Your whole body has nerve endings that fire and warm and excite. So like if a guy is struggling with the erection, instead of focusing on his erection, what should be focused on is, how about we touch his entire body? How about you do a whole sensory body massage? How about you talk to each other, tell each other how much you love each other, compliment each other, point out parts of his body that you're turned on by. You do that stuff, and oh my God, he's like, oh, she's into me. Because the dick is listening to, is this a safe place for me to be? Like we all need to feel safe before we arouse, safety first. And so a lot of men are completely ignoring their own need for safety and connection. And as a result, their dicks aren't working. It's not just medical.
Wow. That was good. There's so much to unpack there. But the part that really stood out was being mindful of all the sensory, not just the penis. And we talk about women feeling pressure. Men can feel that same level of pressure as well. And you look at our society, all the society talks about is penis size. You know, penis size. So how big and how long? How long can you go? How large are you? And I think men get caught up in that where they lose sight of their own desire as well. And the sensory piece hit. And we also think about emotion. If men in particular, women too, but I'm speaking about men. If we as men do not learn how to process emotion and we just suppress, then you have a lot of men don't even know they need that. They don't even know they need to feel wanted, and that's what's causing them not to be as sexual.
Yes. So I just posted, I'm on all these fun fan groups that are super fun. And yesterday I posted for my males, I said, it's a what men want challenge. And I basically asked the question, like, what do you want more of with your partner? Like when it comes to intimacy. And I was so annoyed that a woman was the first person to answer, because I'm like, I wasn't asking you. But she was like, whatever. I'm not going to mention, because I don't want to, like, if she's listening, I don't want her to realize that I think it was snarky. But like, after I got annoyed by her post, then the guys, I was like, what I responded to is I said, everybody's going to be different. So let's listen, basically. And I heard things like conversation. I want her to ask more about myself. Compliments. I want to feel like she likes me. Like I want her to compliment me as a person, but also like my body. Like I've been working out and she never mentions that I've like got muscles now, or even if you're not like muscle, because you don't have to have a perfect body, right? Like mentioning parts of my body that you're interested in, touching me. Many of them were like, I just want to be touched. I feel like the only time she touches me is when she thinks we're supposed to have sex. And I want myself touched. I want to be held. I want cuddling. And this is like across the ages, men responding. I was like, I had such a heart for men yesterday. And I was like, I hear you. I'm seeing you. Like men are starving for connection and closeness, and some of them do know that's what they need and are begging for it.
I have a question.
I
have a question for you on that front.
Okay.
Do you believe or feel that women may be entitled to touch? Like, well, you may be mad, so I'm not going to touch you. Or you lost your job and I'm not feeling as financially secure, so you're not going to have sex with me. Do you believe women gatekeep touch or gatekeep sex? And if they do, what are the ramifications of that?
I think they do. I don't think they do it intentionally. I think a lot of the stuff that people are doing or things that people do are unintentional. The ways I see the gatekeeping happening is when a woman thinks that there can't just be touch for touch's sake. Like she thinks if I touch him, it has to lead to sex. So she'll gatekeep herself because she doesn't want to lead him on. That's always what I hear. And if sex is so sparse, then the first touch he gets, he may be kind of like, oh my God, she's touching me. Because like, again, you're starved. If you're starved for touch, then yeah, when she finally touches you,
there's a hypersensitivity.
You're going to respond, huh?
There's a hypersensitivity to the touch because he hadn't got it at all.
Exactly. So, but they both spouses are interested in this touch. The female wants it too. And so going back to this like warming and matching pace, what couples need to be doing is touching each other every day, all day long, not just sexually, emotionally, affectionately, connectedly, giving kisses, not all French, some French, there could be some Frenchy kisses, those are fun, but like sometimes just like holding each other, maybe kissing on a neck and just saying, I'm your person. Like I'm very intentional with touch. I have a video actually, I'll send you that's about intentional touch. And I guide people to think about what is their intention when they touch their partner. So like I learned this is so random, but I had a client who was smacking his girl's ass too much and she was getting really annoyed with him. And I was like, I'm going to break down what's happening in the mind. And so he's like, I know I need to work on it. And I'm not doing it to like, what do you call it? To make objectify her. It's just that I'll see this pretty thing and I just want to be close to it. And when he said that, I was like, how powerful. Like really, he just wants to be close to the pretty thing. Like she's pretty. I want to be near there. And what's interesting is breaking that thought process down shifted her and shifted him. It shifted him in that he knew like, okay, I want to make sure I touch her in other spots because she would feel the message she would get is he only cares about my butt. He cares about nothing else. And so by learning her message, he made sure to touch her in other spots. So she knew, no, I love all of your parts. You're my beautiful person. And I just want to be close to you. He was intentional about his touch, but she changed how she felt about an ass smacking because it was like, it's not like the thing she was saying was, oh, he's just touching my butt. Now she's saying, oh, he thinks I'm pretty and he wants to be close to me. And so I really get people thinking about this. What message does this touch mean? I even have them verbally say it so that they're starting to connect mentally with the way they touch. And it is powerful. It is powerful stuff, Chris.
Man, well, this whole podcast interview is very powerful. Right? So we're
you know why I do what I do, right?
Man,
Love this stuff.
So your passion, your energy, your authenticity draws people in, and your ability to break down sex, intimacy, closeness, relationships. You're such a teacher, and you use words, pacing. I mean, that was huge once you broke that down. And I know I'm a fan. I can't wait for the book to come out. Do you have any suggested or predicted date or time frame when this book is out?
So I'm actually speaking at the AMPT conference about this. So the AMPT conference that's in Florida, I'm one of the speakers for it. I am hoping to get it out before then, or at least get a link for pre-order out before then. So with that being
said, the one in Orlando?
Yeah, the one in Orlando. I'm one of the speakers, and I'm definitely talking about desire. So if you want to learn more, please come because I'm going to be teaching all about it.
Who's hosting it?
Huh? AAMFT.
Oh, got you. Okay. That's okay.
I'm National Systemic Conference.
The National Systemic Conference. Got you. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be doing two hours of training on this. But so one thing, if people want to get the book, either subscribe to my YouTube or Facebook page, because I will start putting this stuff out at some point on one of those places, but it's in process, right? Like it takes a year really to write a book, and I've been working on it. So it's definitely getting closer, and my goal is to get it out, or at least get a good link out by the time that happens I think it's in November. It's November. Okay.
Well, I can't wait. And you've just given us so much valuable information on this episode. I'll make sure the show notes include links to all of your social, your bio as well. But you've just been a blessing. You put on a master class as it relates to sex, desire, intimacy, closeness, connection. You've transitioned how one man popped his wife on the bottom, and now she sees that she's pretty. So it turned from objectifying her to, wow, he wants me. You've talked about how men's penises need to feel safe before going inside. Right? So you've done a great job. I want to make sure that I give you the last words. If there's anything you'd want to say to the listeners before we transition off.
Yeah, no, I want you guys to know your people first. Like, you're not just sexual beings, you're people first. And we all need to feel safe before we arouse. And safety happens in the mind and in the body and in the context of how you connect with your partner. So treat yourself as a person first in all things.
Man, awesome. Angela, it's been a pleasure. I definitely would love to have you back on when the book drops as well.
I would love
And
to do that.
yes, that we're going to pencil that in. And for those that have been listening, my name is Chris A. Matthews. You've tuned into the Marriage Underdogs Radio Show, and we drop a new episode every Tuesday at 10 a.m. on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I look forward to bringing another licensed marriage and family therapist back to you guys next week. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.